So this is where the trip starts, here in my office. That's what we're hoping for tomorrow, and we're gonna jump right into looking at some wind forecast, some tides, and some navigation charts. The map that I have here, I've actually taken and kind of sketched the perimeter of Kent Island here, and I've added in there, I've looked up the highs and lows, high tide and low tide for each of these locations. Kent Narrows, we have Kent Point, which is right next to Bloody Point. We have Chesapeake here, and we have Love Point. I've taken the key off of this map and had rough straight line distances from one of these spots to the other, and it gives me an idea of the times that I need to, that basically I'm looking for deadlines, and I think we're gonna launch up here in Good Hands Creek launch, which is fairly wind protected, but we're gonna talk about wind here in a little bit with the forecast. It's gonna be pretty rough when we come out here. We're gonna have an easterly wind making this hard long, 5 1/4, 2.6. This is gonna be rough and wet, but we're gonna have a wind at our back, and we're gonna be going with the tide. So high tide is at 5:17. The tide's gonna be going out. The wind's gonna be at our back, and we could get there at 9 a.m. to the point in the southern tip of Kent Island. Could even be earlier. We'll see. We want to kind of kill time here until about 11:30, because the low tide here is at 11:17 a.m. and we're going to ride the tide all the way up to the Bay Bridge, and it's about a 7-mile run. But we really don't need to be there until about 4:45 p.m. So I think somewhere out in here is where we have our best chance of connecting with some of the bigger striper that are making their way out of the bay. They've been up to points north, and they're going to be somewhere along in this in these interesting contours right out here. The other thing, that being on this side of the island most of the day, and honestly we could just launch at Chesapeake and zip back and forth right in here, but being on this side of it with an easterly breeze, there's somewhat of a protection against against that wind. So being right here is a good thing. We're gonna ride the 4.5 miles or so up to the tip of Love Point. We have to go a little bit beyond it. The high tide there is at 6:30 p.m. We're still going to get blasted with the easterly winds when we come here, but we'll be finishing up our day, coming back down to Kent Narrows through, and then back to this launch right here. So let's take a look. I actually have two different wind forecasts. Neither of them are very good, but I think we can pull it off. I look at this one's Willy Weather. It's usually, I'd say, the more I don't want to say conservative, but it tends to give you lower wind speeds than some of the other ones. So 13.9 miles per hour at a peak in the morning at 8 a.m. That's when we're going to be making this run down here. Wind coming across here, going with the tide. That's a good thing. We're going to fly. We're probably going to be at Bloody Point pretty quickly. It'll pick up later in the day. There's a little bit of a lull, and I think that's going to be a really nice time, mid to late morning fishing out, in the main part of the bay along the island. As we get towards the end of the day, it's going to pick up again to about 13 mile an hour. Now, there's some discrepancy. We're looking at Thursday, May 21st, and this one actually has wind at 20 mile an hour at 8 a.m. and then dropping throughout the day to 5 p.m. at 13 mile an hour. So, you know, I think if we can survive the initial, you know, run across Eastern Bay, I think we're going to be in good shape. But you gotta know what you're working with wind forecast, tides, distances, the concept of circumnavigating the Kent Island. If we were going the opposite direction and fighting wind and fighting tide, we'd never do it. So you got to plan and really have a good game plan for utilizing the forces that are out there. I think we're going to have plenty of time to fish. It's not just going to be running from point to point. I totaled up all these distances, and I think if we did run straight lines, we'd be somewhere in the 26 mile range. We're not going to do that. We're going to run back and forth and troll over active pods of fish and hopefully catch a bunch of them. So, all right, looking forward to it. Time to rig up my baits and make sure my kayak is in good shape. I'm really going to take a good look at my hatches to make sure that there's nothing there that's going to leak. So that's important. All right, folks, ended up here at the Kent Narrows public landing. Had to run up the street to get a couple of launch permits at Chesapeake Outdoors. Here with Marty. He's getting ready, and I'll show you that this thing's real important. Being able to be seen out there. We're going to start and finish the day here going around the island, and I think the minimum that we're going to do is 26.2 miles, and each of us is going to have a jerk bait in the water behind us trolling the whole way. So collectively, I think that's over 100 miles of having a bait in the water. So
Marty and Jeff's epic adventure.
We ought to connect. All right, so let's review our itinerary and maybe kind of refocus on this right here. This is the 915 watt-hour battery. The experiment, so to speak, what we're doing is seeing how far we can get on that, and can we do a minimum of 26.2 miles, I think is what I calculated. We're here at Kent Narrows. We're going to run south to Parsons Island. We have an easterly breeze coming in this way, and going past Bodkin Island, we have 5 1/4 to Kent Point, a little further out to get out in front of Bloody Point. We actually need to be here around 11:30 because low tide is 11:17, and we're going to ride that incoming tide all the way up to the Bay Bridge. I'm real excited for this area. This is where I've caught them before in the past this time of year. These big stripers are exiting where they've spawned north in the bay, and they're on their way out. And then we got about 4.5 miles from there up to Love Point, and then end of the day we're riding a high tide as it's dropping from 6:30 till whenever we get back here to Kent Narrows. So, at the minimum, you add up those distances, we have 26.2 miles. We're going to do more than that just because, we're going to double back on some spots and catch some fish. So let's see how it goes. So we're going to track this with the Angler app, and I'm going to go to fish mode and make sure that it calibrates where we are. Yep, there we are. Underneath Route 50 almost at the launch, and we'll go ahead and hit start, and I will go ahead and enter a trip name, and it'll keep track of the distance that we go today. So Marty and I are starting to mark some bait fish. I actually got a school here in about 14 and a half, 15 feet of water. Let's take a look. You can see them off on the right side, so in between me and Marty. That may be important later. That 14 to 15 foot range, starting to see bait fish. So if that's the depth that they want to be at, that's important information. We covered a lot of water that was in the 6 to 8 foot range that there was nothing going on. So if 14 feet is what they want, that's we may follow that contour once we get out past. We have Parson Island here, and then here on the right, we're this little peninsula. We're going to split the gap and head down towards Bloody Point. This is what we're doing most of the day. I can show you. I have, let's see, 94% of the battery, and I'm going 2.6 miles per hour. I'm using 42 watts, and I have 57 miles of range. So, you know, some of that we're going to be going faster than that because we're going to go with the tide and with the wind, and some of it will well, I don't think we're going to go slower than that. So, because we're certainly not going to need to cover more than 57 miles of range. So, but this is it. Just trolling, cruising, covering some distance, and you know, with each junction, with each change in, all right, we've made it to this point and we'll turn that way. I'll show you what we do to line up the next visual marker, and that way I can keep coming back to the side imaging to look for bait fish and look for hopefully bigger fish out here. All right, I never want to pass up an opportunity to point out my own boneheadedness and hopefully saving you from having the same issue. I wasn't paying attention. I was looking at my chart and re-rigging a bait, and I let off the power of the Torqeedo, and the wind whipped me around, and then I started go again, not realizing I still had a trolled bait out there. So what I have here is my line, and Marty helped me get that much out, but I still have line in underneath the prop. So I always bring a spare prop and then the right tool, which in this case is a 17 millimeter deep socket. I'm going to pull that prop, make sure I get all of the line out of there, because the fishing line can destroy one of these motors, unfortunately. So if you cross over your own line, you got to pull the prop and see that you get all of it out of there. So, all right, I'm going to do that, and then hopefully we'll get underway again. All right, we're coming up on Parsons in that peninsula. Let's take a look at switching over to the chart, picking a point to have bearing on, and then switching back to the side imaging to hopefully see some fish. Right here, and then side imaging, I have these preset buttons on that one side. Actually, that one gives me all three, and the bottom preset for me is the big chart. So I'm gonna back up so that I can see the southern tip of Kent Island there, and I think what we're looking at in the distance is that down there. I see it. It's harder to find it on with the camera, with the boat rocking, but it's out there. I can certainly see it. There's the end of it, I think, and then there's a ship to the left. Probably someone out there fishing. So that is our destination, and you can see. Now you can see the bearing, the green line coming off of that point, heading towards it, and let's see, I'm going to steer a little bit. I am headed towards it, I can see that. But yeah, once I have that all figured out, then I can come off of the big chart, and we'll go back to side imaging and hopefully find some fish. I think what I want to do, though, once I get out into this big meaty part of Eastern Bay, is try to find a way to keep myself not in 5 feet, but in that 15-foot range. That way these jerk baits that we're trolling, I got one here, can do what they need to. I'm actually throwing the Rosaries, but this Rapala X-Wrap Magnum 15 is, you get an idea of what we're putting out there. All right, we're on our way between Parsons and Bloody Point. A little schoolie here. Picking up a couple fish here and there. Not the size that we really want. Catching here. Oh, they're trolling. There we go. Sorry about that.
Well, quick release.
So I picked up a little one back there, and Marty and I have zoomed out to a, it's kind of a little channel, little finger point coming up near Parsons, and we've moved from that 6-foot range, and we're really trying to straddle a drop off here, and I'm going to show that to you. You can see on the chart there that we're in 17 feet, but I'm gonna turn a little bit to the right to stay, somewhere on that drop off. And Marty's flanking me on the right, and hopefully we pick up something here. But it's definitely a deviation from running straight to that that point that we have as a destination, but it's worth it. It's worth curving to follow a contour. We're back up in 12 feet, so we're hooking left. Following contours where you see bait fish is just a critical skill. It's something you definitely want to do. You don't want to blindly only take straight runs. If we were doing, we were in touring kayaks and we weren't fishing, sure, run straight lines, but it's always best to straddle a drop off if you can. And we got a decent knockdown. This one pulled drag a little bit. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, that's just a nice thick resident fish. Nice heavy one. That's good. We are straddling an edge where we got about a lot of 6 and 8 foot water and some 23 foot water. We're on 13, so that's a good indication. We're closing in on the southern tip, so it's good to get a nice thick one on, even if he popped off. I wasn't gonna keep him anyways. All right, we are passing one of the access points that we looked at, which is off in the distance there. It's Roman Coke. Initially I wanted to go there, but the tides made it such that it made sense to really do the narrows. Right now, let's look at our time and our progress. It is 10:59, so low tide here at the southern tip of the island is at 11:17. So we're rounding the southern tip at really the right time, and we actually, I'm going to show you my how much of the battery I have left. This was our easy run. We're running with the wind, with the tide, and we're gonna hopefully ride the tide as it comes in up the other side of the island, up that west side of the island. But right now we have 80%, and I'm moving at about 3 miles an hour, and I still have 38 miles of range. I could afford to go a little bit faster than 3 miles an hour. I may notch it up a little bit once we get to the other side, but I also want to conserve such that I know, hey, if the tide is still ripping out when we round that corner, that's going to eat up the battery a little bit more than what we've been doing, maintaining 3 miles an hour down to the point. So playing the tide, playing the wind, and managing your battery based on remaining range is all part of the game. All right.
Hey, got a little striper on here.
Marty's got his first.
That's what we call an overachiever right there.
Nice.
Ain't done yet.
We're seeing a lot of interesting stuff here on the side imaging. We got some very cool looking, obviously intentionally placed structures out here. Do you want to, I know, but do you want to jig this?
We can.
You saw a bunch of fish, right?
There was back there, yeah.
Okay. Some of this stuff. We'll jig on it briefly. But we got to keep a schedule. Golly, there's a lot of stuff down there. All right, I didn't even get my line up to start jigging, and I hooked up. Nice guy. Very cool. Get him in and get him released and start jigging on these fish. All right, I'm gonna get a measurement and a picture of this guy on the. I got my red trout lure here, 2015, that CCA tournament. A 22 incher, nice fish. Get a quick picture and get him on the angler app. And then I want to jig that spot.
Sounds good.
You can see from the marker buoy behind me, we're on a fish reef here, and I had been popping and dropping it. You know what? I'm going to lift you. And I jigged this guy by just letting it, really letting it, you know, sit down there. I got the Z-Man streaks. That's a glow. It's a glowing one, but most people pop it and drop it, and I think that's a great way to get a reaction bite. And they weren't taking that, but what they did take, this one was just letting it hang, you know, that far above the surface, and just the up down of the boat, that was getting them. I'm gonna mark him, and then we gotta leave these fish to continue our path. But that's a nice one. So that's what this one, the one I just got. He was a 23 incher, and it's the Z-Man streaks, and I forget what size. It's one of the bigger sizes, but this one's glow in the dark, and we have the 1 ounce striper eye jig head, and I'm gonna go ahead and put some scent on there. We're not gonna be able to jig that long because we gotta get moving, but a little bit of liquid mayhem and the shad scent is a good idea. So the traditional way of jigging is you put it out there and you follow it down with the rod tip until it hits the bottom, and when you feel it hit bottom, it's going to take a second because we're in 17 feet of water, you pop it up. I'm not quite there yet. Falling, there it is, it went thud. So this is the traditional pop, and then follow it back down with the rod tip and pop it again. That was actually a little bump, but how I got that one. Last one is, they are hitting it. I think these are smaller fish pecking at it, but I was not doing that at all. I was just kind of letting it linger down there and just hold in position, you know, and as the boat was going up and down, the rod tip was lifting it and dropping it. So let's go ahead and try it. Marty's pointing at
You can see
there's fish right
all
there.
this fish right there on the bottom. It's
Yeah,
just big pods of fish.
I'm gonna drop it
That's
down,
a smaller pod than what we were seeing.
and I'm just gonna hold it there. Hold it right above the surface, or right above the bottom. And it's a much, I mean, it's sort of, you know, a finesse presentation. A little bit different than pop it and drop it. So this is the hard part, you know, the gift of covering 26, 30 miles in a day is that you're trolling and you find places like this, but you commit to a long run, you gotta keep going, and that hurts because we have active feeding fish here, and it's fun to sit on them and jig them, but we got to keep moving. I also think we have a better chance of getting our big, ocean run fish. These are resident fish. Let's get back out there. We're gonna stop jigging for now and get back to trolling and covering ground so we get back before it's, I'd say before it's dark, but I mean, at least it won't be the middle of the night.
Yeah, a little better fish.
Yep. They're in here. Up and in. 68%. Still cruising.
I was just explaining, we were talking about how much ground we got to cover and the speed and the stuff we have to do it. And I was talking about how I could notice the difference as the tide slacked off. We were running with the tide for a while, and as soon as the tide slacked off, I had to bump up my watts. I was running about 75 to 80 watts to maintain 3 miles an hour with the tide. As soon as that tide dropped off, I had to bump that up to about 90 watts to maintain the same 3 miles an hour. Just the difference with the tide and the wind and stuff.
All right, we're out near Brick House Bar and Marty has a fish on.
On a joint. Hey.
He got all three, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he wasn't at first, but he is now. Nice, clean little fish there.
You want to measure it?
Size. Oh,
Here you go.
oops. I'm guessing about 17, maybe. Call it 18 and a half.
I think there's going to be a lot of them out here
Yeah.
with 19 inches being the keeper size.
Yeah.
I'm going to get one picture for the Angler app and then we'll let them go.
All right. See ya.
So I'm at 50% and we're certainly within sight of the Bay Bridge. We got a little bit of a wind coming at us. We've rounded Bloody Point and we're headed north, and I don't know, we're somewhere in that continuum between Bloody Point and the Bay Bridge, just making that long run. So, but yeah, I'm at 50. So 50% of the battery remaining. 10.8 is if everything remains the same. In other words, the wind that's blowing in my face and the current, everything else, the tide running at 82 watts at 2.7 miles per hour, it changes a little bit, but I got between 10 and 13 miles remaining, and I guess that's about what we have to go. So 26 miles round trip, although we swung pretty wide back there. We'll see. We'll have to kind of play it by ear, and hopefully we continue to have the tide helping us. We do have about a between 6:30 and 7:30 deadline at Love Point. We got to be there, because if we don't get there by that time, the current is going to be coming back out, and I don't want to fight it rounding it. I want to ride it once we round the tip and start heading back to the Narrows. So that's the update. 50% of the battery remaining. I think we're doing good. We're a little bit behind the schedule on time, and we're making some straight runs, but energy wise, we're in good shape. Okay, it is a little bit after 5. We're behind schedule, but Chesapeake is right there and the Bay Bridge is right there, so we're not too bad a shape. It's I would say we're probably about 40-45 minutes behind. So the battery percentage, I'm at 32, and I think once we get to the bridge, it's about 4 1/4 to the top. and then 3.5 in. So call it 8 miles once we're at the bridge. So I gotta look at this and really budget my energy appropriately. I'm gonna be riding the last little bit of the incoming tide, which the high tide is at 6:30 up at Love Point. The current will continue to flow a little bit after 6:30, and I just need to round that corner by, if we're up there by 7, I think we're in good shape. If we go much later than then, we're going to be fighting the tide, fighting the current, you know, pushing us back. So I want to round that tip and then ride the tide back into the wind in the river there, leading down into the Narrows. So we're not in bad shape, but it may be a late night. It will be a late night, but that's okay. We knew that going in. This is the hardest part of the trip for me, because we gotta keep time. We gotta keep moving through this. I'd love to stay here. I know I can catch shrimp on this pilot. Gotta keep moving.
It's not like a better fish. There we go. Go ahead, shake it. Oh, shake it.
Nice work, man.
Go.
So you had 2 on?
Yeah, I don't know if, I think the other one came off. Definitely had a double hookup for a second there.
That is cool.
Let me just double check. No, he's still there.
You're kidding me.
Nope. It's a little smaller fish, but
That is awesome. Oh,
what's this?
twofer. Double knockdown. Nice job, man. That's how it happens. Woohoo! Good job, Marty.
All right, stand by.
No, hold them up.
Oh,
Never mind.
Sorry.
So you got, what were the lengths on them?
A 20 and a half and a 22 and a quarter.
Very nice.
Doubled
man.
up.
Good
They're
job.
fresh.
All right. Got a nice 21 inch on the Yozuri flash minnow, and really needed to head to shore just to stay out of the wind. We gotta make time, and we're not doing it out in the middle, you know, with the wind blasting us. So we'll go ahead and get another nice, you know, Chesapeake Bay resident fish back in the water. No bigs today so far, no ocean going fish, but these guys are certainly a lot of fun. All right, Marty's hooked up. I got one there, and I got one on the other rod, and I got a crab pot to boot. You got a pretty good one, huh?
Yeah, I figured it would be with that lure.
What? 3 at once, man. I got a double, and you got one there. That's what happens when you find these schools.
Yeah. Here we are. Tripled up. 3 of them. We're gonna let them all go.
All right. 1, 2, 3. See ya, fishies.
There you go.
That was so cool.
Woo!
All right. Nice 21 incher. We'll get him back in there. All right, so it's about 8:30 at night, and we're just passing Love Point in the distance there. According to Marty, let's shut off the motor so we can just kind of drift together. We're gonna take a look at this map, and according to this, our high tide was at 6:30, and we know that it started going back out because we've been fighting it. The last 3 miles we've been just creeping along at like 2 miles an hour, which really isn't a great trolling speed, but we were still catching fish, so I guess it works. Ideally, this time of year I like to be trolling, 3.5 or so, but we had to conserve our power to do as many miles as we're going to do. So the Narrows is in the distance. I think I measured it out at about 3.5 miles from here at Love Point to where we turn down into the Narrows. But we're still catching fish, so we're going to keep trolling, see what else we get. At least now we can turn and run with the wind and then with the tide at the same time. All right, we are heading back by light of our depth finders, and Marty's got his 360 light on. I've got mine on up there, nice and bright, and we're moving across the this opening of the Chester River. We got pretty strong wind coming across. This is more than I thought we would fight in this last 3.5 mile stretch, but we're still chugging along. We will get there. We've pulled lines in, and it just wasn't worth, in this darkness and in this amount of wind, trying to wrestle with a crab trap if you happen to snag one. Not worth it. So, Marty, we've caught some fish, right?
Yeah, we actually had a pretty good day.
So we're gonna get back to the launch here in a little while. We've probably got 3 miles to go yet, and we'll take a look at the angler track and see how many miles we did. I'm real curious to find out. All right, we're in Kent Narrows and closing in on the last little bit of the trip. What time is it?
10:30.
10:30 at night. We're gonna take a look at the angler track and see what distance we got out of this trip. Not sure yet. Excited to see what it is. I will tell you that I was absolutely wrong about having, rounding the Love Point and being able to have the tide helping us. So much water was coming out of the Chester that it was, we fought it the whole way. So that was difficult. I actually paddled with the motor, and I'm right at 0 right now. I don't know if that shows up, but it's still giving me 35 watts, even though the motor's at 0. So just limping in. We'll see how many miles we got. You ready for a cup of coffee or something? Just to be in a truck with a heater?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm cold and I'm wet.
Oh.
And I'm stiff.
Yep. You trust your legs?
About half.
We're gonna finish up our angler trip, and yep, here we are back at the Narrows, and we will hit stop trip, end trip, yes, and that's it. 41.8. Oh my god. I was thinking it'd be cool if we broke 30, but 41.8 miles in a day. Oh. All right, let's hit play on this thing and just see what that looks like. It goes each little spurt. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit and shows you each of your catches. 41 miles, almost 42 miles. It's really a cool app to be able to show, all your catches as you go. Rounding the tip, we missed Bloody Point. We kind of cut short there, made a long run up there. Marty started catching them. So we're approaching the bridge. It's weird to go by there and not catch fish on the bridge, but Marty doubled up. I started catching them. We tucked in to get out of the wind. I doubled up and we actually tripled, and then this long run against current and wind, and we're done. 41.8. That's awesome. Thanks for doing it with me, Marty. That is very cool.
I'd say anytime, but yeah.
I don't know,
maybe
we're
not
doing
for
it
a
again.
while.
All right, I'm back in my office. We're gonna do a little wrap up and look at the map and maybe just give a breakdown of how things went. I do want to make note that this is the 915 watt hour battery. I would love to be able to tell you that it took us the whole way, but it did not. It got us close. I'll explain that in a minute, but I'm gonna go ahead and charge it. 12 pounds of lithium, and once that light starts blinking, see if you can see that indicates that it's charging. Some people want it to turn green when it's ready. It never will. It'll turn solid red. That's just how they set it up. It's about an 11-hour charge with this particular battery. It comes with a charger. Let's take a look at the map and go over how things went yesterday in that 41.8 mile trip. So we started here in Kent Narrows and came around here. Somewhere in here is where I had to take all the fishing line out of my prop. We cut the corner on Parsons Island, came down here, caught that first little fish there, came down, caught him along the way. I really did try to trace some of these contours where I was straddling a, deep on one side and shallow on the other. So I wasn't doing straight lines the way that I drew it on the map. We kind of curved some. We hit some of the different structures in this area, rounded up. We didn't go all the way out to Bloody Point Bar. We kind of cut the corner here because I was getting worried on time. We moved up through this area, caught a couple fish here and there. Once we were close to the Bay Bridge, and I really was hoping that I'd have time to fish some of the pilings here because I've done real well there in the past. We just didn't have the time. I knew that I was running out of time to clear the top of the island and to get back down through. At this point, where I'd done, I'd say, most of the trip, is where I got worried, and I actually started paddling with the motor to get more range out of it. Whereas I had been running at, say, 90 watts to maintain. Now, depending on the tide, I'd run at 90 watts, and I'd get 3.1, 3.2, maybe 3.3, or as fast as 3.4 going with the tide. All of a sudden I was like, yeah, I'm starting to feel the tide in the current push me back once I was in this area. So I would notch it down to, say, 50 watts or 45 watts and paddle with it up through this area and be able to get more life, out of this 915 watt hour battery. And it worked. We rounded the tip. I mentioned last night, I really thought that, once we rounded the tip, we'd be able to ride the tide this way, because I'm thinking, outgoing tide generally in the bay goes in this direction. But what I wasn't thinking is that the Chester River here was evacuating all its water and it was going in this direction. So I was wrong on that. I was also fighting winds that were coming across here. So Marty and I really had to both use the motor at a very low setting, say 30 watts, just as an assist, to cross over here and paddle with it. So we paddled, and it took us, I think, I marked this as 3.5 nautical miles, which I think I'm learning is not regular miles. I still have to look that up. Because I clocked this whole thing at 26 something, and we ended up with almost 42. Part of that is that we didn't run straight lines, but I think part of it is the difference of nautical versus regular miles. Anyways, 8:30 to 10:30. that's a long time, and it's because we were slowing down because we were just using a little bit of power and paddling with it into wind and against the current. So that was tough. We had breaking waves in the dark, paddling, and he was using his Mirage drive. I was paddling, you know, not full speed, but really pushing it to get up. We saw the channel markers out here. They were blinking red and green lights out here, and we came in this way. Once we turned the corner on this, the current was going this way instead of going across. So once we hit this point, yeah, it almost sucked us back in. That's about the point where I showed my my throttle at 0 and still giving me, like, you know, 34 watts, even though it was clearly bottomed out. So, you know, that's it. Great battery. We really had to go with the tide going out and then with the incoming tide coming up, but then once we got there, it stalled out and we really slowed down. Caught a bunch of fish too here. And then from Love Point down to the Narrows was tough. So, you know, the takeaway and really the point of doing this video was to show what is possible with a single 915 watt hour battery. I would say we've exceeded, you know, what's possible, because we definitely had to do it with an assist, but still, almost 42 miles of exploration and trolling for striped bass in the Chesapeake. That was a lot of fun.